Indian and European leaders are meeting virtually for their 15th summit. COVID-19 is likely high on the agenda, with discussions focusing on global cooperation to protect lives. Leaders are also expected to unveil a roadmap for India-EU cooperation for the next 5 years. Rebecca Mundan has been following the talks, and she joins us now for more on this. Rebecca, what aspects of the COVID-19 crisis could India and the EU cooperate on?
Well, of course, both Europe and India have been dramatically affected by the coronavirus pandemic in terms of both the health impact and the impact on their economy. So this was something that's been discussed by the two sides. The European Council President Charles Michel talked about the need for a global response to the pandemic. So the coronavirus pandemic was, of course, a matter of discussion. And in the press conference that's ongoing at the moment, he mentioned that this was something that was discussed in detail. It was one of the top topics on the agenda, of course, being the backdrop to everything that's going on at the moment. And he talked about the need for both sides to strengthen their health systems. There's also, of course, a need for a better response and preparedness to limit the spread of the coronavirus, and of course the impact on the economies both in Europe and in India as well. How to reduce the socio-economic impact, how to recover from that, and the need to create jobs and so on. These are all matters that would have been part of that conversation.
Rebecca, leaders they're also expected to unveil a 5-year roadmap for their strategic partnership. Tell us about that.
Well, this is interesting because this India-EU summit comes after the EU-China summit, which was held last month. And of course, that was rather strained. And again, this summit that's taken place today comes against that backdrop of tense India-China relations over border issues, and the EU as well looking to reduce its dependence on China when it comes to trade and investment. So analysts here in India are saying this is really an opportunity for India to strengthen its relations with the EU as things change globally, and there are shifts in terms of trade and investment. And the EU is India's largest trading partner, but there are opportunities for a lot more in terms of trade and investment between the two sides. And this is something that was mentioned by EU leaders in the press conference. Also, there was an announcement ahead of the summit, which was the sealing of a global civil nuclear energy agreement between India and the EU. So that's also an interesting development. They talked about opportunities in terms of the digital economy, also in terms of climate change. So there are a lot of opportunities here for the two sides to develop those relations. They really did talk about the strength of the partnership between the two sides.
Well, saying all that then, Rebecca, there's also been speculation they could be restarting negotiations on a free trade agreement.
Yeah, so it was interesting in the press conference that's just taking place at the moment. They talked about the EU leaders said that there's been the establishment of this high-level trade and investment dialogue between India and the EU. This is something that has come out of this summit. So that appears to be something that could move discussions forwards in terms of what have basically been stalled talks on in terms of the free trade agreement. So they did mention that that's something that it would potentially, these discussions could move towards that. And they do have ambitious plans for some kind of agreement in the long term, ultimately. But however, those talks have stalled over the years. And of course, against this backdrop of the coronavirus pandemic, the impact on the economy, both the EU and India are looking for opportunities to boost their trade and investment ties. But at the same time, there's also the fact that India has moved towards perhaps some more protectionist ideas as well to protect jobs and to try to boost its own economy Mr. Modi, India's Prime Minister, has talked about the need for India to become more self-reliant and to produce more within India. So that could perhaps potentially hinder these negotiations going forward. It's something that definitely could have an impact. But it seems like there has been some progress, and there may be a new lease of life when it comes to these talks.
Well, thanks for that. Rebecca Bundan speaking to us from Mumbai.